Welcome to Hidden Struggles. I'm your girl, Lady C, and today I'm talking with Deanna June, a woman who not only walked away from a high control religion, but also walked toward her own healing. From religious trauma to emotional resilience. This is a conversation about finding your voice after being silenced. Let's dive into Deanna's journey. All right, Deanna?
Thank you for having me.
You are so welcome. And this is a long overdue chat. I know you were on my other platform, you and your husband, Jared, about a couple of years ago. We really enjoyed having you on the show. And now here over on this platform, we're going to just talk a little bit about, learning life lessons after, going through this experience and helping other people to see how, if they decide to leave this religion or if they've already left, how can they pick up the pieces with their lives? So you want to kind of talk about, what was the biggest thing that woke you up to the truth about this religion, Jehovah's Witnesses?
I think that I always questioned disfellowshipping, the removal as they call it now. And that just always got to me. And my family woke up first. And they're also, without getting into the whole long story, CSA was also a big trigger for me. And so when they woke up, finally, it came down to my husband, finally me allowing him to show me everything with the Australian Royal Commission. And I just couldn't accept that as okay in any way. And it was sort of from there. It also, reading the Bible itself and realizing a lot of things did not add up. So that was sort of where it came all from.
Wow. Now you talk about your husband was able to, share this information with you. How long did it take for him to talk to you about it and for you to accept it?
He and my 2 adult children left, and I would say for 6 months, I did not want to hear a word of it. I was like, okay. No. And then finally, they kept showing me love and supporting me because I was still going to meetings and still actively a Jehovah's Witness. And that I couldn't get over that they were being so kind and not trying to force me to not be a witness. So that's what finally led me to saying, okay, I guess maybe I'll give them a chance and hear what they have to say, because they weren't trying to force me or anything. So that's what opened me up to listening to what they had to say.
That is so good. And your family is a very good example of the healing, the growing together after leaving, because of the fact that you all are out together, your immediate family.
Yes.
Because when you think about the number of people, in the last 20 something years that I've left, there are still people that I've talked to years ago that their family is still holding out and not speaking to them. In fact, there's a symposium or something, or some information on this year's convention program talking about how to treat people who are trying to wake people up, as you're saying, when your family was trying to be loving and kind, and they want them to just turn people right in. They don't even want to deal with that. And so you can see how far we've come in terms of the religion and how they're realizing that they're losing so many members to this process. So has anybody in your family, your mom, your dad, or anybody like that, have they come anywhere close to even giving you an opportunity to even talk before this information came at the convention?
My brother left years before me, so I didn't need to wake him up. And my parents still do have a relationship with me. I'm not disfellowshipped or disassociated. But I just sort of leave that where it is. I don't like to talk too much about it. And my dad, he's a little more strict. He does speak to me, but it's limited. And nobody else in our family has really allowed us to talk too much to them or anything. Most of them shun us.
How has the shunning affected you? You were pretty close to your family, right?
Yeah. The shunning initially was was horrific. I am a people person. I am very friendly. My husband jokingly calls me the mayor of our town because I talk to everybody. So, it was really hard. I was friends with tons of people in the organization, let alone family. And we didn't disassociate. We aren't disfellowshipped. So, and I continued going, like I said, even when my family didn't. It was hard. And I tried to reach out and say, do you want to go get coffee? And I wasn't trying to convince anybody to leave. And this was way before I had my YouTube channel. So it was so hard for me. And that really played into my alcoholism. So, it was rough the whole way around.
Oh my goodness. Sorry to hear about that. And then not only that, but are you saying that when you left, it was just the sheer act of not going to the Kingdom Hall that caused all the shunning to start?
I quit going to the Kingdom Hall in the spring of 2019, and not a single soul called me to see where I was or stopped at my house to see where I was until the fall of 2019. And it was one single sister who didn't even go to my congregation, who had just been a lifelong friend, who happened to stop by to say, hey, I heard you weren't going to the meeting. Are you okay? And she was so sincere and so sweet. And then nobody again after that for another 8 months did anybody call me. Nothing. And I had been the most loud, boisterous, talkative, invite people over to our house, entertain all the time. My son is super outgoing and talkative and plays instruments. We always had people over to our house. We were super well known in our circuit, and nothing. My husband and children had quit going first. Then 6 months later, I quit going. And I think it just went, I think the gossip started around our circuit of, oh yeah, Jared and Deanna and the kids, they're a bad association now. And we weren't doing anything. We just weren't going to meetings. We weren't celebrating holidays. We weren't voting. We weren't celebrating. We weren't doing anything yet. We just literally were not going to meetings. That was it.
And that's powerful. I'm saying this because I feel like the more popular that you are in the organization, a lot of times people can see, oh, you fell off your bandwagon or whatever, your wagon. And now it's like, oh, there must be something wrong with the family to stop. Because it makes me wonder if you were a family that wasn't going to all your meetings and you weren't that popular. I wonder if the fallout would have been the same.
I know, because we went from my husband being a ministerial servant, my son was a regular pioneer, I was an auxiliary pioneer, and we went from that to my husband stepped down, stopped going to meetings, my son stopped being a pioneer, and I quit auxiliary pioneering, and then the next month we just stopped going to meetings. So, we went from here to here.
There you are. You have positions, titles, doing all this work, and you're at the top of your game, as it were. And then all of a sudden you stop going. So I wonder if people thought maybe they're what do you call it? Privately reproved or something. Or I'm sure the gossip mill was going.
I'm sure.
Did you guys say anything to anyone in the congregation, family-wise or whatever, to make them think that you were questioning the organization?
No, not anything. We literally, I didn't even say to my parents at that point that we were questioning anything. And my husband had one really good friend who was an elder come over and say, what's going on, when he first left 6 months before. And my husband was honest and just said, I just don't think it's for me. And didn't get into a bunch of reasons on why, because he didn't want to get disfellowshipped, quite honestly. He just said, I just don't think it's for me. And, of course, the elder, being very kind and loving my husband, tried to convince him on why he needed to come back. And my husband just listened politely and said, thanks. I love you. I love you for coming here, but I don't want to do this, but thanks. And, that was that. So truly,
but let me let's kind of like go back and talk about that.
Okay.
When you are one of Jehovah's Witnesses, it's those little subtle statements that people make that would actually show someone that you're leaving and you're not agreeing with the governing body. Because I remember years ago, before we even thought about leaving the religion, I had a girlfriend who stopped going to the meetings. And all I wanted to know from her was, do you think this is the truth? And as long as she felt like and kept saying that, yes, I still believe, then it was like, okay, there's hope. She's going to be just fine. But the moment your husband told his friend, his supposed friend, conditional friend, that it was not for him, that is that's what sealed the deal, because that's what they're waiting to hear. You don't think it's for you means you're not agreeing with the governing body. And that's probably where the gossip mill started, from that angle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we just, it was really difficult. Like I said, I'm a people person. Mm-hmm. And that really did. And don't get me wrong, as a recovering alcoholic, I know I made that choice to use alcohol to numb myself. So I don't put that on other people. The drinking was my own problem, but how they acted towards me made me go in such deep despair. That's what made me decide to turn to the bottle, because I didn't know how. I wasn't going to therapy at the time. I didn't know how to deal with things. In the Jehovah's Witness world, you're never encouraged to go to therapy. And then even once I started going to therapy, it was really hard opening up and being open and honest, because again, in the Jehovah's Witness world, you are always told, you don't want to say anything that's going to bring dishonor to Jehovah or say anything bad about the organization. So even though I wasn't believing it was true anymore, that was back, ringing in the back of my head. And I was afraid to be completely honest with my therapist in the beginning. So I wasn't getting the help I truly needed.
Well, how did this go? Okay. So like when you said that you turned to the bottle to, help you through this process, you hadn't been to a therapist at the time. So when you did that, had you had any other exposure to alcohol issues, or was this your first time dealing with that?
No, I had been dealing. No, that's fine. I had been turning to alcohol. I started drinking at 37. I was a late bloomer with drinking. I had never drank when I was younger, but I am an alcoholic. I have that DNA. And so when I started drinking hard. I kept trying to pull back and not drink as much. I would do a little better for a while, but I would keep, falling prey to the drinking. And with most alcoholics, the biggest problem is you're not facing the fact of why are you turning to that alcohol? What is that real problem of why are you turning to the alcohol? Because once you finally understand, often, not always, but those deep, dark reasons of why you're turning to the alcohol to numb yourself, and you make peace with those things, you can often let go and not even want to drink the alcohol anymore. Because I was never drinking alcohol for flavor, for taste. I was drinking for effect. I didn't even care if I liked how it tasted. I just wanted for everything to be numb and go away. And that's why alcoholics drink.
Okay. So let me ask you this then. So this kind of started before you even woke up to the truth about the truth then. And so basically what I hear you saying is you were no doubt experiencing some issues, trying to figure out about, your belief system. You're not really happy with your life and the way things are going. So you're coping with alcohol in this manner. So you're actually connecting those dots after the fact, right?
Right. Absolutely. Okay. I didn't realize how I was questioning so much further back than I realized. And I didn't see it until I left and got therapy. And then I looked backwards and saw, oh, I was questioning the truth in my 30s. And I didn't leave till I was 45. I couldn't see it, for what it really was until I got therapy and started, on my little journey of looking at things clearly for what it was and looking at the timetable.
Yeah. So it's good to kind of talk about this on this episode and bring this out, because there are other people that's no doubt feeling the same way, not realizing why. And I think that the biggest issue is you are taught this is the only way to God. And so when you start seeing things and it doesn't add up, how do you get past it? And like you said, you chose to turn to the bottle. So for people who are watching this episode, you got to go and do your research if you're feeling this way, because there's a reason why you're feeling a reason to be numb, because like you said, it's not adding up. And then all of a sudden you wake up and say, oh my goodness, if I would have known this before, I might not have gone down this road,
Right. And I just want to add, and I'm not going to get into the long story of it, but I'm also diagnosed as bipolar. And 43% of bipolar people are alcoholics. So there is a correlation there. And I didn't get diagnosed until much later in life because I wasn't going to therapy, which again, you're not encouraged to go to therapy as a witness. So I didn't know that as well. And one of the things you do as a bipolar person without even knowing it is you tend to sort of self-medicate with alcohol for the bipolar. And I didn't know I was doing that. So all those things correlate. And that's why it's so important that if you are struggling, and you might not know you're bipolar, you might not know you're depressed, any of those things, but going and trying out therapy for at least a little while could really help you in these areas.
Well, that's a good point then, because that means that if you were not one of Jehovah's Witnesses, then you would have ended up having another issue somewhere else in your life, not realizing how to deal with it. And at that point, now you're still turning to this alcohol, right? So at that point, I guess it's people just need to get in touch with themselves to find out why they're feeling how they're feeling, so that they can, figure out how to make things work in their lives, or not be in the stressful situation where they feel like they have to medicate. Because like you're saying that the 43% of the people who are bipolar are alcoholic. Are there any other substance abuses that they could do besides alcohol?
Well, there 43% are alcohol, but I don't know what the statistics are on drugs, but I know there is correlation with drug abuse as well, or other addictions like gambling, overspending, things like that. That definitely correlates with people that are bipolar. And I know that other, issues with like whether depressed, whatever, correlates with these things as well. You'd have to look up the statistics.
Okay. Well, you know what you want to share with the bipolar is, now what I heard about bipolar is, sometimes you have an upswing and then you have a downswing. So you want to kind of tell us what that is, that people can kind of look for if they feel like they want to know whether or not they may be feeling the same way?
Yeah. So bipolar, what I have is bipolar 2. There's bipolar 1 and 2, and bipolar 2 is a little less severe than bipolar 1. And what happens with me is I go in and out of, when I'm not medicated, I go in very severe swings of being up. I tend to be more manic. And a lot of people used to call it manic depression. And so I would be very manic and I go up, 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 up. And that's great. I feel wonderful when that's happening. I feel like I can conquer the world. And the problem is I do crazy things sometimes because I really do think I can conquer the world. I'll take on too many projects at once. I will talk faster than usual. I will say yes to 50 things in one day because I think in my head I can do 50 things in one day. And you will overspend money sometimes. You will get involved in things that are maybe dangerous because you just aren't thinking clearly because you're so fast going. Then you get to a highest point and then you come crashing, and that's where the depression comes in. And then you get to a point where you've crashed so hard because you got to that high peak and then you just come down very quickly. that you are just like in bed and you just can't even get out of bed, and you can't figure out why do people care about life. And some people get, where they want to, not be here anymore. I don't want to say that word on YouTube, but where they don't want to be here anymore. And, they'll get that low, or maybe they don't get quite that low, but they just get like where they can barely focus. They can barely go to work. They can barely do anything. They just don't see the point of anything. And then other times you will sort of come to a little bit of a middle ground for a little bit, but then it just is these super highs and lows. Different people last different amounts of time. Some people, the upswing is like a few days and then the downswing is a couple days. For me, I tend to go for a week or two and then come down for a few days. It just depends. It varies person to person. Medication helps you to do this, and it tends to be a little more like this instead of this and this. That's the best way I can describe it. But a lot of people don't like taking medication right away because the up is so fun. I'm not going to lie. It's like being on drugs naturally.
Well, this is the first time I've ever heard somebody say it like that, but oh my goodness.
Yeah, it is. That's the best way I can describe it. So,
oh my goodness.
But medication, if once you get used to it and you get used to being on a normal level, it is so helpful. And then you don't need to self-medicate with alcohol. Then you don't want to do these crazy things, and you don't feel like just being in bed all day. You find a balance and can be a more reasonable thinking person.
How long have you known about the bipolar? Were you Jehovah's Witness when that was going on, or?
I did find out as a Jehovah's Witness. I got diagnosed around 38, right after the alcoholism started. But now looking back, I can trace my bipolar tendencies to being a teenager. Like I've been like this since I was a teenager.
Yeah, they generally say that people catch it when they're younger. And they, like when you're in school, a lot of times they say like your teachers notice things. And I think some schools, I know years ago when I was going to school, sometimes they had certain types of programs that they would, have for people, and they would have certain types of testing that they would go to different schools and do. And that's when kids would get diagnosed with stuff, or you just had kids that just could not really function. And so now the teacher's like, oh, this person needs to be on Ritalin because they're moving around too much, making too much noise in my classroom, But when you were a Jehovah's Witness, can you give us an example of what it looked like when you were manic and then when you were depressed? Like, I'm sure you were probably out in field service all the time at that point, right?
Yeah, I was. I would, when I was manic, I was on it, man. I was the type that was like, I'm going to have over the circuit overseer and I'm going to make a huge lunch and everyone can come. And I had the book study at my house when there was still book study, and then had service at my house. And I had 2 little kids and I worked full time and I would auxiliary pioneer. Like I was manic. I did and my house was meticulously clean, and I cleaned for a living. Like I never stopped moving, never stopped going. The problem was I would come crashing, and I still had to be a mom, and I still had to live up to all the things I promised I would do, and still had to go to work. And so I don't know what in me especially I think being a mom would make me drag myself out of bed, even though it was the last thing in life I wanted to do. And I know that even though I wasn't medicated, and especially before I was drinking, that's how I managed to get through, was being a mother. Being a mother dragged me out of my depression quite often. It had nothing to do with being a witness. I didn't really care about that. It was that I wanted to be a good mom. And that often dragged me out of my lows and out of my bed.
I've kind of heard people say that because they knew somebody else was dependent on them. So then when they were having some issues in their lives, that's what pulled them out of their funk, as it were, to help them keep going because they knew other people needed them. And it's really good to hear you say that you realize that. And when you were actually, dealing with the situation at the Kingdom Hall, now you got your manic. Now, what does it look like when you came crashing down? Did you miss meetings? Did you not go out in service? How did that look?
I would miss meetings and then I would be guilted. People would call you under the guise of, I saw you missed a meeting. Are you okay? But then, 5 minutes into the conversation, they'd be like, well, I noticed you missed a meeting like 2 weeks ago too, and you're like, all right, yeah, I know where this is going. Because that's how I tended to go. I tended to go 2 weeks of being really up and then, about 5 days of being down and then 2 weeks of being up and then about 5 days of down again. So, that I had a pattern and I don't know how people didn't see that I had a pattern.
And they're not going to see that because I don't want to cut you off, but I just want to make this point real quick. I just feel like the only thing that was driven into our head was, that someone is loyal if they show up to these meetings. You could have came to the meeting and slept through the whole meeting or just got there late, whatever it is. As long as they saw you at that meeting, that's all that counted.
Right.
Go ahead and make your point, what you were going to say.
That's okay. And I was going to say, and I would then push to go to meetings because I felt guilty. And I cannot tell you how many times I would go stand outside of the Kingdom Hall and just cry and cry and cry, could not control the crying and have panic attacks, have horrific panic attacks at the Kingdom Hall, shaking, crying, feeling I was going to throw up because I couldn't be there. Like I was there because I felt guilted to be there, but I was not in the right headspace. I was, I wasn't medicated. I needed help. I should have been going to therapy. There were all these other things, all these factors in my life that no one cared about. They just cared that I was a body sitting in a seat.
Yeah. And it's like, one of the things that, I knew when I was a Jehovah's Witness, I liked to be different. And I did not like being like everybody else at the Kingdom Hall. I wanted to have my own identity. And so when you were going to that meeting and people are like, well, why aren't you at this meeting? Well, why aren't you pioneering? Well, how come your husband's an elder and you're not at least auxiliary pioneering right now? Whatever it was they wanted you to do, it was always more Watchtower stuff, So I'm just making this point because I want you to bring out something else in a second. But for people who might be listening to this broadcast that don't have any history of Jehovah's Witnesses, we just want to just bring that point out very well to let you know that everything that you do in your life, you're measured as a Jehovah's Witness. And everything you do, or if you do something that's different from the group, will be held against you. Because right now, I want Deanna to share with my audience what it was like when she went to Alcoholics Anonymous. You want to talk about that? What that was like?
I can. I'm not a fan of Alcoholics Anonymous.
But we're going to talk about it because what we want to do is we want to compare it to the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah.
What did you notice about that? I remember when we talked about this.
Yeah. So first of all, I want to say that if you are going to AA and it works for you and it keeps you sober, you should do that. I don't want to discourage someone from getting sober if it's working for you. It did not work for me, and here's why. It was too much like being at a Kingdom Hall meeting. It was too regimented. If I didn't agree with every little thing in the big book, if I didn't agree with everything they were teaching through AA and I did not accept all of their viewpoints, I got reprimanded just like I did at the Kingdom Hall. And, everything was based on having to believe in their version of sobriety and accepting their way. And if I didn't, I was literally told on numerous occasions that if I didn't do it their way, I was never going to get sober. And I can tell you right now, I'm sitting here very sober. I have been for 1 year and 8 months, and I have not been to AA at all.
Congratulations on that.
I'm doing great.
Right.
Yeah, so I just found it to have too many similarities, in my opinion, to how the Jehovah's Witnesses did things. Some people don't find that. And so I don't want to knock someone if they're finding success with it and keeping sober. then do that. It just did not work for me at all. You went in, you recited the same little things at the beginning of each, meeting. You had to go to so many meetings. It was just too regimented. I couldn't take it. It was too much like being a Jehovah's Witness for me.
That was interesting when we had that conversation the other week, and I was like, oh my goodness, I didn't realize it was all that intense like that. But this is the world that we live in. So just because you have one group of people, like they always say, there's nothing really new under the sun. When you bring people together in a group, this is the group dynamic. And the group dynamic for them is the same as Jehovah's Witnesses. And the whole thing is being loyal to whoever is in charge of that group. Because I believe, and I'm just going to take a stab at this and say that when you go to Alcoholics Anonymous, AA, whatever you want to call it, these people have to have a certain number of people that are graduating from this program and not, falling back into recidivism. So at that point,
well, they don't call it. They say you're never graduating, and so I personally think that is also like a little bit of a catch, because then you always need them. If you never graduate, you always need them. Just like in the organization, you always need the governing body. You can never, you can never figure it out just for you. You always need them to figure it out for you. So AA, you never graduate. You always need them in order to stay sober. And I don't find that to be true.
Yeah. But, I guess the point I was trying to make is, they want to measure a success rate versus how quickly somebody went back into like recidivism. So like if someone goes through the program and let's say they get through it and maybe they track you for however long you want to do, however long they're going to track you. I don't know how
they
they're
forever. They track you forever.
Bottom line is you go through their system. And they can show the average person that came through this office did not relapse for 5 years. So they've got something to measure their success. Because remember, let me know whether or not are these people getting, is this organization receiving donations? Are they getting grants money or something like that?
I will give them credit, is just like Jehovah's Witnesses, it's truly just based on donations. That's all they, it's like and it's only the members that go there for a meeting and they just pass around a plate and you just and you don't have to give. They just pass around a plate and then you can just put $1 or $2 in or $10. I mean, like whatever you want to give. And a lot of people don't give anything because they don't have the money to give. So that's how everything is funded.
Oh, they're funding it through you, the participant that's in the program? They're getting the money from you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's not funded by anything other than the participants.
Wow. So what does that money cover? The instructors?
No, the instructors are just it's a lot like witnesses. It's just fellow alcoholics. It's really like the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Okay, so you're telling me that the instructor is like a recovering alcoholic as well?
Yes. So everyone are recovering alcoholics, and it's all volunteer basis. No one is paid for any job. And so everyone that does every single job, even the higher up people that are like, even the higher up people that are collecting the money and like bigger in charge and, because they have books and all kinds of stuff they make. It's all volunteer. And I don't know who the highest up person is, just like we didn't used to know who the governing body was. It's a lot like the Jehovah's Witnesses. I'm sorry. I'm like
visually like building this I'm building it in my head, what you're saying. I'm looking at I'm actually seeing the collection plate going around. What I'm seeing is you sitting in a circle. Are they sitting in a circle?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So I'm visualizing them sitting in a circle, passing this plate around, and the person walking around teaching and telling their story about their addiction.
It depends on what kind of group you go to. There's different sort of meetings. And so there's like a big book reading. The big book is the main book the two guys that started this back in the 40s wrote. And it's all based on scripture. It's all based on the Bible. And it's, in my opinion, it's a little condemning and guilting. But that's just my opinion. People don't have to agree with me, but,
right.
That's how it plays. And then people just go around and comment, or they have other different books where it's just like a little daily reading and it's a positive message. And I liked that kind of meeting better. And then you don't have to comment. They go around and everyone's given the opportunity to give a little comment about how it might apply to their life or something they got from it or whatever. I liked those meetings better personally. Mm-hmm. There's other meetings that were more like you can give your personal testimony of like what you've gone through with your alcoholism, or a good thing or a bad thing, either or. There's all different kinds of meetings you can go to, and that, and it tells you there's an app. Nowadays there's an app, and it'll tell you it's a big book meeting. It'll tell you it's an all ladies meeting. It'll tell you it's, it just tells you what all the different kinds of meetings are. And the more involved you get with AA, the more you understand the lingo, the more you understand what's happening. And yes, there is AA lingo, just like
Jehovah's Witness lingo. Well, let me ask you this. Like, how long did you get through so when you were dealing with your alcoholism, was there anyone that told you, hey, look, you're going to have to go to AA for 6 months or whatever? How long did you attend?
AA is a lifelong thing. If you choose to go with AA, you're going to need to go to AA until you die to stay sober, according to them. And I went to AA way early on because I just chose to. Because I was trying to get myself sober. So I was in my early 40s the first time I attended an AA meeting, and no one told me to. I mean, it was just my husband and I had talked, and I was like, I got to figure out something. And so I went, and I was trying, but I was sort of half-hearted, my efforts with it. And I would go some, and then I would drink some, so then I would feel guilty and not go. But I attended on and off for years. And then I got sober the first time at 45, right when I was leaving the organization. I went to rehab, and then I started going to AA regularly. And I stayed sober for 2 years, but I was miserable. I was not sober for the right reasons. I didn't really know why I was drinking. I hadn't figured all of this out yet. I went back to drinking in 2020. Don't know why that happened. Who knows what was happening in 2020? And then a year and 8 months ago, I decided I have to get sober. And the second time I really wanted to get sober, I was already working towards figuring a lot of things out. I had been out of the organization for several years. I think I was in a much better mindset to figure things out. And I knew AA was not going to be the answer for me. It really wasn't a good fit.
Wow.
And so that's why I turned to yoga and meditation and therapy.
Okay. So you just mentioned yoga and meditation. So you want to tell our audience a little bit about how you got involved with that?
So when I went to rehab the second time, the rehab facility, if I can speak, had various programs available within the facility, and one of the things was yoga. And, as Jehovah's Witnesses, we weren't supposed to get involved with yoga. So I had never really done much with it. I had done some little stretching things that were yoga-like, but never done much. And so when I loved it there. And so when I came out after the 30-day program, I found a yoga studio right in my local neighborhood. And I started going, and I loved it. It was so helpful for me. I loved that it was a mind-body type exercise, because I often felt when I went to the gym, it was sort of mindless. I could just walk on the treadmill or lift weights, and I still was stuck in my head thinking about things. Whereas with yoga, you're working so hard on, doing all the different positions, and they're sort of walking you through it and talking, that I would just think about what I was doing. My mind didn't wander off, and I just found so much peace with it. And it really worked my body too. It was hard work sometimes, depending on what kind of yoga you do. And it just really brought me so much inner peace. And then I started trying the meditation apps and stuff that they have on your phone, not so much in a spiritual sense, just to calm myself. And I really started using that along with therapy to help me along my journey of getting and staying sober.
Interesting. I mean, you're the second person as an ex-Jehovah's Witness that has told me that you are, using yoga and meditation to cope with life. Mm-hmm. And I think the other person was also having problems with alcoholism as well. So that, that may be something that people could actually check into if they feel like they're having these issues. And I just feel like because the internet is so vast and, I am a chat GPT drone. I mean, I'm there with chat GPT all the time and just double clicking on all these different topics that come up. So it's like to me, chat GPT, artificial intelligence is like Google on steroids. I mean, it gives you all the answers that you could actually need to use, but you could go there to get information too about yoga as well, I'm sure. Right. So, I really appreciate you, coming on my platform to share your experience. And I know you have spoken to different other YouTube content creators, but I feel like sometimes you don't always say the same thing in a discussion and different information comes out. But is there anything else that you would like to say about your life, about helping people to learn life lessons so they don't have to go through the actual experience? What do you think that you could also share as a closing thought to this podcast?
I think that one of the things that yoga taught me is that don't limit yourself. Don't set so many boundaries. That's what the Jehovah's Witness organization does, is set so many boundaries. And by getting involved in yoga, I found out how much I loved it. And now I'm turning it into a career. I'm in the process of getting certified to become a yoga instructor. And it's a creative field. I've always wanted to get into that field. And I've always wanted to help people. So it's a beautiful way to do all that and make some money. So why not? And, so again, don't stifle yourself. Don't put yourself in a box. Be open to opportunities. Talk to other people. You never know what's out there. I think as witnesses, we always put ourselves, close ourselves in those boxes and, open yourself up, talk to others. You never know what opportunities are available to you.
That is such good information and excellent advice, Deanna. And I really, like I said, I really appreciate having you on the program.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And this has been Lady C, and I'll see you all on the next episode. If anything in today's conversation hit close to home, whether you're struggling with addiction, bipolar disorder, or just trying to make sense of it all, please know you don't have to go through it alone. I've added trusted resources in the video description below, including mental health hotlines, addiction support groups, and places to get real help without judgment. Take a moment to scroll down and check them out, even if it's just for someone you love. And if nobody's told you lately, you matter. Your story matters, and healing is possible.